Alright, it's Mike, Old Religion Dystopia, O.R.D. 3, third channel. Origins of the Gods by Andrew Collins and Gregory L. Little. Reading and commentary, if you will. We are now on page 4. This part is Hoven, Weep, and Archaeoastronomy. Brandon related that Hovenweep was one of many collections of towers, forts, and lofty ramparts. Supposedly, the production of the fabled Anunnaki Indians. He also noted that several astronomical alignments were built in the stone towers. I was especially intrigued by the stone towers, some of which were 3 stories tall, with their small openings oriented to the solstice, as well as several proposed alignments of the stars. In the early 1980s, American archaeoastronomy was in its infancy. It was controversial in mainstream archaeology. However, many people knew that the alignments that ancient sites had to certain stars had an importance we didn't really understand. When we visited Hovenweep in 1988, we arrived in the very late afternoon after traveling over what can barely be called roads. The unmarked dirt road into the site often vanished, and we drove across desert and flat rock formations, not really knowing if it led there. When we reached the end of what we thought was the road, it was apparent we had arrived, as a canyon loomed right in front of us. There was no one else there. It was strangely quiet. Back then I didn't understand the significance of the profound silence. And by the way, when I married went to Death Valley, I witnessed pure silence. That was 20 some years ago. I'm talking about, this is me, Michael Adams, saying that. And I didn't want to leave the place, but the people I was with, the company I was with, they wanted to get going. They wanted to get to San Francisco, of all places. I ended up going to was it Orville, California, to see my big brother and my ex-wife and her brother, who came from Portugal. They wanted to go to Lisbon. They're city dwellers. Anyways, where was I with all this? We quickly walked everywhere around the site and took photos of the towers. But as the sun started going down, we needed to leave. I was then in a frantic search for something I didn't quite grasp, but the alignments that ancient sites like Hovenweep supposedly had to stars were enigmatic and very intriguing. I knew that the shamans and medicine people who lived at Hovenweep had connected with something, but I wasn't sure what it was. In the 1980s, it was becoming clear that ancient Native Americans were carefully charting the movements of the moon, sun, and various stars. It is accurate to say that the archaeologists attributed virtually all of the astronomical alignments to marking the seasons for planting, harvesting, and holding seasonal celebrations. In brief, all of the alignments supposedly served as a calendar. It is obvious that ancient cultures were focused on the solstice and equinoxes for planting and harvesting, but what they were doing was far deeper than that. Why they pinpointed stars at certain times of the year has long been a great mystery. Of course, archaeoastronomy has come a long way since the 1980s, due in large part to the work of alternative writers and researchers who are not part of the mainstream archaeology community. Hovenweep in 2019. The drive from Farmington, New Mexico to Hovenweep winds through mountains and desert in New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Just before we crossed into Utah from Colorado's two-lane Highway 41, we were surprised to see a huge boulder along the side of the road that was covered in petroglyphs. I stopped the car, backed up, and Laura got out and scrambled up the embankment to take photos. Just then, a Colorado State Police car flew by us and immediately screeched to a halt. The officer watched us for a few moments, and when Laura got back in the car, he left in the opposite direction. When I looked at one of the photos, I was astonished at the ancient carvings. But I was also saddened by the large amount of graffiti made by modern people. The destruction of the Native American culture is pathetic and continues to this day. I am fairly confident that the police officer stopped to make sure we weren't defacing the rock. When we reached the entrance road to Hovenweep, we were surprised at the major improvements there. There were prominent signs and a paved road that led to a modern visitors center. Other than a couple staff members, we were the only people there. After checking in, we began a short walk to the main ruins, just one of 6 different groupings of Pueblo constructions associated with the site. Only the occasional sound of a crow could be heard, and we stopped several times and just listened to nothing at all. It's a beautiful thing too when you have that experience, by the way. My soul yearns for that. It is difficult to really describe what it feels like to be outside and surrounded by utter, complete silence, and the significance of it is probably lost to most people. Yet it is important in subtle ways. The silence was profound, but it was eventually interrupted by the sounds of other visitors arriving, walking and talking. Those sounds reverberated everywhere. We walked through the main site called Square Tower Canyon, took a lot of photos and video, and then drove to several other associated Puebloan people sites some miles away. But we felt a lot different during that brief time of silence and complete calm in the environment. Silence can be deafening. Living in nature in a dark and quiet world. Hovenweep is also known for its spectacular nighttime views of the sky. And as I have written many times in the past few years, the sky has lost its significance for many of us. When the majority of people walk outside at night now, all they can see are the most prominent stars. Even that will soon change as SpaceX gradually puts up their planned 42,000 low Earth orbits Starlink satellites that in all probability will be the brightest lights in the night sky over many areas. However, because of modern lights and pollution, the Milky Way is already obscured nearly everywhere. To most people, the implication of an obscured view of the night sky is unimportant. We typically live our lives as far away from nature as we can. But it's not just the sky we are isolate ourselves from, okay, say insulting, but isolating ourselves from, it also is all of nature. We spend most of our daily 24 hours inside a house, a building, a car, and another vehicle. We typically drive or ride in what is basically an insulated metal container and walk on pavement. We avoid walking on soil or dirt, and if we do, we usually wear shoes that insulate us from the ground. We spend most of our nighttime inside. If we are outside at night, there are usually lights in the area. The vast majority of our time, we are surrounded by concrete, wood, metal, bricks, and lots of electrical wiring and cables. We are also immersed in a swirling mass of electromagnetic fields, EMFs. The electric fields that few people really understand or care about. But electromagnetic energy is probably the key to understanding some intriguing mysteries. For those who have been spending their lives in the quest to understand the paranormal or UFOs or any kind of psychic phenomena, electromagnetic energy is a key. So here is a huge clue to understanding the people of the ancient world. They lived every moment of their lives in the Earth's ambient EMF and did so without the noise of modern society. There were virtually no human-produced EMFs in existence then. Changes in our ambient EMF were the result of natural processes such as water movements, rock formations, earthen embankments, earthquakes, underground tectonic strain, and weather phenomena such as thunderstorms. This will be mentioned again in later chapters. But for the moment, it is important to understand that the Earth serves as a huge electrical current with a surrounding electromagnetic field or bubble consisting of extremely low frequency wavelengths that vary in a regular pattern. However, the fundamental frequency, which can be described as the ambient frequency of the Earth's EMF, is 7.83 Hertz. It is known scientifically as the Schumann resonance. There are 3 Schumann resonances, all multiples of 7.83 Hertz. But the ambient fundamental frequency is 7.83 Hertz. All life forms on Earth evolved within the Schumann resonance, and incorporated it into their evolving neurological and biological processes. For example, the transition point between the brain's theta wave and alpha waves. Let's try this again. So the brain's theta waves and alpha waves, as measured by an electro in here we go. Encephalograph. So electroencephalograph is 8 Hertz, essentially at the cusp of ambient Schumann resonance. Alpha waves are produced when you are awake but relaxed, while theta waves are characterized by profound relaxation and meditation states. So one piece of the puzzle being put together in this book is that attuning oneself to this ambient frequency makes you more amenable to certain profound experiences. That is especially true for paranormal experiences that create balance and harmony in one's life. This is one reason why people find lying by the ocean, sitting on a mountaintop, or immersing oneself in nature so relaxing and beneficial. As modern technology continues to produce more and more electromagnetic frequencies leaking into the environment, attuning to the ambient Schumann resonance is becoming increasingly difficult. We now live in an electromagnetic cesspool. As I sit typing these words in a densely populated urban area in Memphis, Tennessee, I check how many Wi-Fi signals I am receiving. There are 21 signals available. I am picking up my own Wi-Fi devices, those of neighbors and a hotel, and I even get signals from the FBI, Homeland Security, and the Coast Guard, which are located a few hundred yards away on the other side of a small harbor. Each of those Wi-Fi routers sends out bursts of ultra-high frequency electromagnetic waves continually. Some of these signals are powerful and extend for some distance, while others are weaker and localized. There also are cell towers all around that broadcast countless bursts of electromagnetic waves every few moments. These waves aren't small, confined beams as most people conceptualize them, but are emitted as gigantic electromagnetic bubbles covering wide areas. They are designed in the most efficient manner to maximize their coverage. They are becoming increasingly powerful and emitting ever-increasing frequencies. For example, 5G wireless technology is already partly installed here in Memphis and is being rapidly put in place everywhere. And of course, now, since this was written, let's see, when was the copyright on this? So he was writing this. It was published last year. And it was written. Obviously, it's even increased. My place is just surrounded by it, where I live in Ohio, on the border of Michigan. Okay, it's being rapidly put in place everywhere. In addition, countless cell phones are continually sending out high-frequency electromagnetic energy bubbles to keep in contact with the towers. And far above us, satellites, both civilian and military, use electromagnetic beams to transmit their signals. What does all this mean? Back in the early 1990s, I corresponded with British author Albert Budden, which is interesting because the image here is from Butter Bud. I wonder if he has something close to that. Budden, Butter Bud. By the way, that image that you're looking at right now is not an artist's rendering. It's actually an image that who no longer has a YouTube channel, but Mr. Butterbud filmed in the sky. If you pay attention real close, you'll see a Bigfoot in the sky. Connection to all this? I believe so. Anyways, back to this whole dang thing. I apologize, by the way, for my crappy reading, but I am going to do this anyways because it's for me. And hopefully it might be for you as well. Anyways, who was working on the theory that I was also working on, albeit both of us had our different twists on the idea. Budden, a UFO skeptic, wrote a series of books on the theory that the entire range of paranormal phenomena and UFOs are related to EMFs and electrical energy fields that naturally emanated from the Earth. Of course, lots of researchers have proposed similar ideas, including Paul Devereaux, I guess how you pronounce it, Greg Long, neurologist Michael Persinger, and several others. Okay, and several others. That's what I should say. In our book, 1998 book. In his book, 1998 book, Electric UFOs, and his 1994 book, Allegories and Aliens, Budden proposed that UFOs and related phenomena were electrical in nature and speculated that many health issues were emerging from so much EMF and electrical pollution being generated in our increasingly industrialized society. Budden mentioned a controversial modern ailment called electromagnetic sensitivity, and characterized by an individual experiencing a host of ill-defined symptoms attributed to exposure to modern electromagnetic fields. Budden's theory asserted that the energies involved were both natural and man-made and had no intelligence or sentience of their own. In essence, they are simply overlapping energy and radiation fields that can affect human neurological processes in strange ways. And if you combine that with the jibber jab, you know, to start to understand why we have these symptoms now. I have MS after a jibber jab from 2009. Combine it with all the MS, no wonder I'm in a mess. Oh, I wish I was in the Death Valley at this point. I mean, the irony thing is, yeah, Death Valley is pure silence. The place that I live, it's a Death Valley, and people don't even realize it. Death Valley of EMF poisoning. Or if you were to say sensitivity, right? In 1994, both Budden and I speculated that the mineral magnetite, which was first discovered in the hippocampus of the human brain in 1992, was perhaps the primary way that EMFs affected brain processes. Budden asserted that electromagnetically induced hallucinatory experiences accompanied by occasionally visual electrical phenomena in the atmosphere provide the entire explanation of UFOs and paranormal phenomena. According to that view, there is no other source or intelligence behind them. That represents one very major point in which we differed. However, in recent years, it has become clear that electromagnetic pollution is very real and may have significant and unknown health consequences. There have been many studies that show that some levels of EMF radiation do in fact have harmful effects on the human physiology. If you read the precautions in the last pages of the tiny print manual that came with your cell phone, you will see that your phone is supposed to be kept away from your body. Of course, just about no one does that, but we are constantly assured that the EMF levels that all of our modern technology produces are within the acceptable range as long as you do not use it too much or hold it too close. Which is interesting, the Obama phones that they have, you have to put it real close to your head or else you can't talk. No one can hear you, and you can't hear them. Even on speaker. I wouldn't even have the damn thing if I didn't occasionally need it. And I hadn't, you know what, I already got the damn thing like 5 months ago. No, was it 5 months now? And then I hadn't had it'd been years since I had a cell phone. It was back, although my first, I started taking pictures out in the field, I was using the old cell phone. It wasn't hooked up. I just used the camera part of it. The internet is rife with articles linking the wide range of medical disorders, to EMF pollution. But in general, technology companies consistently deny the validity of such reports. The World Health Organization relates that there are many anecdotal reports that make a tenacious link between EMFs and various mental health conditions such as anxiety, depression, headaches, sleep disturbances, and even epileptic seizures. Of course, there's a World Health Organization, so we can't trust them either after what we've seen them get involved in and what they're up to with their eugenics program. A 2018 study published in the Lancet journal refers to EMF proliferation as electrosmog and relates that there is an urgent need to do adequate research on the effects of so much EMF radiation in the environment on both mental and physical health. Many other scientific articles plead for such research to be conducted, but funding for such research is scant. In short, it is not in the interest of technology development firms to restrict their expansion, and some health effects may be viewed as acceptable. Of course, we know this to be the case, right? Especially if only mental health issues are affected. If it's true that only mental health issues are affected, it is likely to be very difficult to scientifically prove this. And the government makes a lot of money by selling EMF wavelengths to telecom companies. As the FIVEG technology continues with its unstoppable rollout, all that can reasonably be said is that we are all in the midst of a large experiment. In addition, there is one more piece of this that remains totally acknowledged and unresearched. It appears that no one has thoroughly studied the FIVEG frequencies or other cellular frequencies due to viruses and bacteria. However, we do know that EMFs can cause bacteria to rearrange their DNA and mutate. In sum, we live in a swirling EMF cesspool. The world we live in today has a very different electromagnetic background than the ancient world had, and we have no definitive area if there are or might be consequences. Did I say, I meant to say idea. We have no definitive idea if there are or might be consequences to it. Understanding the ancient mindset, the psychological near impossible. So we'll try this again. The understanding the ancient mindset, a psychological near impossibility. A psychological near impossibility. And this is part of my MS and part of my dyslexia. I swear I'm looking at the word, I know what it says, but what comes out of my mouth is it's completely different than what I'm seeing, or vice versa. I'll see freaking words that aren't even there, and I go, where did that word come from? Honest. There's nothing I can do about it. And people say, well, just don't record your readings. Why? So I stop growing. This is the only way to even deal with it, is to read out loud, believe it or not. So anyways, one major point in discussing the remote, quiet, relatively EMF-free site of Hovenweep in the first chapter, along with the modern proliferation of EMF-producing technology, is likely lost into many readers. Recall that the way we live our lives today, relatively insulated from nature, was also mentioned. So here's the point. Many of us try to understand the ancient world. That includes how ancient people lived their lives and why they erected the amazing mounds and earthworks and countless megalithic stone structures found nearly everywhere around the world. We want to know what their spiritual lives and rituals were like and why they focused so much on the stars. How shamans and medicine practitioners engaged with a realm many of us call the paranormal. We want to know if so-called paranormal phenomena are real, or if they are simply the result of the mind, of mind tricks and hallucinations, as most skeptics argue. We want to know if the ancients were really tapping into some sort of alternative reality or communing with an unknown intelligence when constructing their incredible sacred sites. Or were they deluded by their own misunderstanding of the natural world? Our ideas of ancient gods, visiting aliens, supernatural forces, and spiritual entities intruding into our world just superstitious ways of explaining the forces of nature? Or might there really be some other reality at work? There are likely some legitimate answers we can get to these questions, but gaining a true understanding of the ancient mindset is a far more difficult task than most of us realize. Think for a moment about just one ancient anomaly found in America: the Newark, Ohio earthworks. And my buddy over there in Australia asked me if it was affected by the train derailment. I used to work for Norfolk Southern as a train conductor, believe it or not, taking freight train from Toledo to Chicago. Now that's on their side of the state where they had the derailment, and it happens quite often. It happens more often than people want to admit. And I'm surprised there hasn't been. There has been kind of. It seems like maybe a low. I mean, I worked in the railroad. It was like every week there was a derailment somewhere. But a major one like that, no. They're prepping us anyways for the frickin' next phase of their World War eugenics program. Let's get back to this. So the Newark, Ohio earthworks. Now that's actually close to where the train derailment kind of is, I think. I haven't looked at the map. But if it's Norfolk Southern and if it's on the east side of Ohio, then it has to be on the Chicago line most likely. And if that's the case, then it's within maybe half an hour to an hour from where the accident is. Probably within that vicinity by road. Anyways, around 2,100 years ago, a group of mound builders, commonly called the Hopewell culture, began construction of a set of geometric earthworks in what is today Newark, Ohio. I think L.A. Moserly says that there's a lot of indigenous elders in North America that say that they didn't do this, that they were not the ones responsible for it. Then I hear other people say otherwise, so who the hell knows, right? Can't even get that right. That's amazing how this simulation, this reality that we live in, is beyond comprehension. Don't you think? I mean, the amount of confusion. Something at the very top is responsible for the confusion. Something maybe human-like or people-like. Even now, the formation boggle the mind and defy verbal description. Over several miles in extent, a complex several circles and square earthworks enclosed 20 to 30 acres were connected to a 50-acre octagon formed by high walls of earth. Pyramid-shaped tourniqueted mounds were erected at each of the 8 points of the octagon's wall. Long walkways, a uniform 175 feet, 53.3 meters wide and enclosed by linear walls of earth on both sides, extended from the earthen circles and octagon formations leading to the other square earthworks and smaller circles formed from walls of carefully piled earth. Many of these walled walkways were miles in length. One walled walkway extended some 56 miles, 90 kilometers, south to a set of almost identical earthworks in Chillicothe, Ohio. Is that the? It sounds like is that where the place is? I don't know. And you know what I read there does not even describe. You can have the problem with words. You cannot describe what the place actually looks like. And in some ways it's impressive. In other ways it's not so impressive. From a diagram, and the mountains don't look at it, but something was there at one time. That's for sure. I think. Unless, who knows, maybe the Army Corps of Engineers made all this stuff just so we'd screw with our minds. You never know about that. You never know. None of us were there. That's how bad this whole situation is. None of us know. Most of us living today have no clue really what would happen 100 years ago. Even with our history books. History books only do so much. It's revealing that it's any kind of truth. It's usually a very narrow sliver of what was really going on. Usually revolving around politicians and generals and armies. and not the everyday person, what they were going through. In the 1982, a purpose of the octagon and its connected circular earthwork was figured out by a pair of college professors, Robert Horn and Ray Hively, a philosopher and an astronomer. The octagon served as a physical permanent observation mechanism to directly point to the moon's key movements on its 18.61 year lunar standstill cycle. In brief, it took its builders at least 18.61 years to complete the design of this colossal structure, and perhaps another 18.61 years to create the accuracy of it as a lunar observatory. And then that's the bare minimum, mind you, what he's saying. Just imagine all the other multiple 18.61 years that would have had to have been tacked onto it to confirm and to observe if it really did work or not. So that tells us as well that how much do we know that what they're saying is right. How many 18.61 years has people been observing the accuracy of these structures? Anyways, it's known how it was done, and yeah, you can have your computer models and everything and your mathematical models, but nature has a way of throwing a cog or a wrench into it all. So, right? Anyways, we know why it was done. It was built for forming large earthen mounds and geometrically shaped walls. Okay, wait a minute. Let's try this again. In brief, it took the builders, okay, so we got this 18.61 years to check the accuracy of it as a lunar observatory. It's known how it was done. We know why it was done. It was built by forming large earthen mounds and geometrically shaped walls from basket loads of earth piled in. I don't believe the basket part of that. I don't believe that. I'm just assuming that you don't know that. And specific locations and in accordance to a plan overseen by someone. It was created to chart the movements of the moon over 18.61 years so that the lunar cycle and eclipses could be predicted in the future. Obviously, the builders conducted rituals related to the moon at specific times. So that is the simple explanation of how and why it was done. But what was the mindset that motivated it? What was the belief system that propelled so many people to engage in backbreaking work for such a long period of time? How did the difficult lifestyle of hunter-gatherers, nomadic tribes engaged in limited agricultural methods enable them to remain organized and focused on such long-term construction activities? Probably called slavery. Huh? My conclusion has long been that it's a nearly impossible task for most of us to truly comprehend the world beliefs, motivations, and mindsets of the ancient people. They lived in nature every moment of their lives. They became one with nature. I think it's true to assert that no one reading this can say the same for themselves. Ancient Native Americans had intimate relationships with plants, animals, insects, waterways, the weather, the sky, and the landforms they interacted with every day. They touched the earth constantly. They saw the night sky in all of its splendor every night. They lived in a very quiet world, completely free of EMF pollution. We, on the other hand, can only try to comprehend how the ancients lived and interacted with their world, which is our world too, by the way, that's been robbed from us. The differences between then and now are so vast they can be seen as incomprehensible. People assume that by spending a week camping, hiking, or sitting in the wilderness or on a mountain to meditate, they can make the same connections that the ancients did. But physically, that's simply not really true. You might get a momentary glimpse of what the ancients were immersed in, but you can only really experience it the same way they did. One big difference is this: you were not raised in that natural world. Even if you stay in nature for any length of time, you know you are going to back. You're going to go back to your isolated home and shelter where you. Okay, let's try this again. Even if you stay in nature for any length of time, you know you are going to go back to your insulated home or shelter when you are done. You know that you are going back to your world and life. Another important difference is more subtle. You are tuned to the Earth's natural EMF resonance, and you live in a world swirling with human-produced EMFs. We evaluate and make judgments about everything based on how we perceive the world now, and we use our current knowledge and beliefs to evaluate how we assume it was back then. Our perceptions and beliefs are formed and shaped by what we experience in our day-to-day lives. Whether it is by observation, through education, reading books, or via other influences we encounter. Learning about and manipulating the world we live within creates a powerful built-in perceptual bias related to humans' remarkable ability to adapt and survive. We have adapted our mindset to a world where we have created our own lifestyle, which is insulated from nature, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We have insulated and protected ourselves as much as we can from a world that has a chaotic nature. It's a natural world of sunrises and sunsets, floods, earthquakes, thunderstorms, other weather phenomena, interacting with dangerous animals, interacting with plants, and dealing with the basic human condition are all at the same time. Some of it is predictable, while other parts of nature are seemingly chaotic. The ancients spent their entire lives in the natural world and understood it in ways many people today belittle as animism, superstition, and being downright savage and primitive in nature. These ancient people understood that they were connected to the natural world in mind, spirit, and body. They were one with the natural world, and their shamans and healers connected to nature to provide understanding, power, and even control. A few very attuned people today are able to connect with the forces of nature and understand what lies at its core. A few can enter that state of connectedness at will. I'm not one of them, but the long quest I've been on has given me a few glimpses of that connectedness. I've been able to sort out some of the important ideas that drove the ancient people to do the things they did. All things are connected. Back in 1990, I titled my book People of the Web, from a deeply held belief that has been expressed by many Native Americans from many different tribes and eras. A quote that expressed this belief is attributed to Chief Seattle, a Squamish chief who lived in what is now Washington State. He died in 1866, but a 1972 film script recreated a speech or letter supposedly formed from Seattle's own words. It related, quote, "All things are connected. Wherever befalls the earth, befalls the sons of earth. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself," end quote. The interconnection of all things means every part of creation is like a portion of a spider's web. If you pull on any strand of the web, it affects all the other strands. Vibrate one part of the web and all of it vibrates. But the idea of the world as a web has a far deeper meaning, because the web is weaved by a spider, a creature that has intelligence and a plan. The spider is often symbolically seen as a weaver of all of life, or creator. But it is also a trickster in some Native American lore. The trickster is an element in nature that causes disorder and chaos, and has been cited as the original troublemaker. And it weaves traps that can be beautiful and alluring. The web is both creation and chaos occurring simultaneously. We are all people of that web. That's probably a good place to stop, and then we'll get into Carl Jung, a little bit about, and talk about Carl Jung, tricksters, and John Keel. And this is part B. This is part one, part B. I guess this is part B or part one. Is that how you say? I don't know how to say it. I'll just say part 1B of Origins of the Gods. I think it's worth reading, for me at least. If no one else ever hears it, no one can ever blame me for not trying to share. So,
you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind.
heartbreak I feel. Seasons don't change who we are. The good is gone, but there's nowhere to go. Seasons don't change.